I had been looking forward to Thanksgiving all year. The smell of roasted turkey, the laughter echoing through the house, the warmth of family. It was supposed to be my favorite day. But the moment I stepped into the dining room, all of that evaporated. There was no seat saved for me. Not at the kids' table, not at the corner, not anywhere. The chairs were perfectly arranged, as if my presence had been erased from the room entirely. My stomach dropped, and for a heartbeat I froze, clutching my coat like a shield. I could feel their eyes before I even registered the whispers. They were subtle at first. A stifled laugh from my cousin, my aunt glancing at her husband with that smug little smile. Even my parents, who should have been my safe harbor, avoided looking at me directly. The silence around my absence was deafening, and the sound of my own heart pounding felt embarrassingly loud. I had walked in full of hope, only to be met with the cold reality that, in this family, I was invisible. I had spent years trying to fit in, to earn my place, to show that I mattered. And yet, here I was, standing awkwardly at the edge of a room that should have welcomed me. The contrast between the warmth of the dinner and the chill of their disregard cut deeper than any harsh word could. Every laugh, every shared glance, every perfectly served plate was a reminder that I was unwanted, overlooked, and underestimated. For a moment, I wanted to turn and walk out, to escape the sting of exclusion. But something inside me tightened instead, a quiet, simmering anger that refused to be ignored. This wasn't just a missing chair. It was years of favoritism, whispers behind my back, the subtle ways I had been made to feel small, and as I took a tentative step forward, surveying the room filled with smug smiles and oblivious chatter, I realized something. They thought this was just another Thanksgiving where I would shrink into the background, quietly endure, and leave without a fight. But they had no idea what was coming. What happened next would flip the entire dinner upside down, and the table that ignored me would soon witness a truth they could never unsee. Thanksgiving had always been a complicated day for me. On the surface, it was a celebration. The house smelled of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. The laughter of cousins echoed down the hall, and the living room glowed with soft golden light. But beneath that cozy exterior was a pattern I had learned to recognize long before I could even name it. My parents had favorites, and everyone in the family knew it. My sister, the golden child, was the embodiment of perfection in their eyes. The one whose achievements were celebrated, whose opinions were sought, whose mistakes were easily forgiven. Meanwhile, I drifted along the edges, careful not to ruffle feathers, careful not to be noticed too much. It wasn't always obvious to outsiders, but within the walls of our home, the dynamics were clear. My accomplishments were quietly acknowledged, but never celebrated. I could bring home a high grade or organize a small success, and the response would be polite, almost dismissive, as if my efforts were expected, routine, or barely worth remarking. My sister, on the other hand, could trip over a shoelace, and it would become a story retold at family gatherings, full of praise for her resilience, charm, or humor. I had learned to live in the shadow of her favored status, to accept it as immutable, as if my worth was permanently measured against hers and always found lacking. Every Thanksgiving, this dynamic played out with precision. The table itself was a symbol of the hierarchy. Mom and Dad would fuss over the golden siblings' plate, arranging napkins just so, making sure everything was perfect for her. I, meanwhile, had my place somewhere convenient, usually at the end of the table or on a folding chair pulled from another room, never truly part of the main gathering, never at the center of attention, never fully seen. And the cousins followed suit, learning which smiles were safe to offer and which to withhold. Over the years, these rituals became a cruel form of conditioning. I learned my place, internalized my marginalization, and perfected the art of smiling while feeling invisible. But it wasn't just about attention or gifts. It was about respect, acknowledgement, and the subtle ways in which a family communicates value. I remember moments as a child, trying to speak up during dinner, only to be interrupted or ignored. My questions were answered with impatience, my ideas brushed aside as cute or funny. never taken seriously. Meanwhile, my sister's opinions carried weight. Her jokes were applauded, her stories retold like treasured family lore. Even now, as an adult, the echoes of that favoritism haunted me. The laughter at my sister's achievements rang hollow in my ears, a reminder of the boundaries I had learned never to cross. It wasn't just the parents' actions that reinforced this hierarchy. It was the unspoken agreement among relatives. My aunts and uncles, my cousins, even the friends who visited each year seemed complicit in the pattern. I could sense it in glances, in the timing of laughter, in the subtle shifts of conversation that excluded me. Over time, these small acts of dismissal coalesced into a deep, simmering resentment. Thanksgiving became less a holiday and more a yearly reminder that I was always on the periphery, a spectator in a celebration that should have included me. Yet, beneath the bitterness, there was nostalgia too. I remembered the warmth of my grandmother's hugs, the comforting rituals of carving the turkey, the way the house smelled of spices and baked apples. Those moments were bittersweet, fragments of love and comfort intertwined with the sting of exclusion. They reminded me that I had a choice. I could focus on what I was denied, or I could quietly plan for a day when that imbalance would no longer define me. This duality, the warmth of tradition, contrasted with the cold reality of favoritism, set the stage for the night I had just walked into. Every detail, every subtle slight, every whispered joke had prepared me for the betrayal I would face at that Thanksgiving table. I knew deep down that this dinner was not just a meal. It was a test of patience, resilience, and the quiet power I had been building outside their awareness. And as the soft chatter of relatives filled the room, I felt the weight of years pressing down, along with the flicker of something new, a determination that this year, the story would be different. I walked into the dining room that Thanksgiving afternoon, my heart cautiously hopeful. I had dressed carefully, picked out a subtle but elegant outfit, and even brought a small dish I thought they might enjoy. A gesture meant to signal that I wanted to be part of the family, part of the celebration. The air smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon, a familiar scent meant to evoke warmth and welcome. But the moment I stepped forward, the illusion shattered. The table was full. Every seat taken. Not a single place had been saved for me. At first, I froze, hoping it was a misunderstanding, a fleeting oversight. "Oh, we didn't think you were coming," my mother said, her tone light, almost dismissive, as if erasing me from the event was nothing more than a logistical quirk. My father offered a faint, awkward smile, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe you can grab a chair from the garage?" my uncle added, his words coated with casual mockery, as if this tiny inconvenience was somehow humorous. Laughter rippled around the room, quiet, knowing, almost conspiratorial. The humiliation hit me like a cold wave. Relatives who had once smiled at me now smirked, whispering to each other, pretending nothing was amiss. My cousin nudged another, giggling, clearly in on the joke. I could feel their eyes flicking toward me, some filled with pity, others with amusement. The contrast was glaring. Here I was, standing awkwardly, dressed for warmth and connection, and they were seated comfortably, celebrating as if I didn't exist. Every polite smile, every forkful of turkey, every clink of glassware felt like a reminder of my invisibility. Embarrassment rose first, curling in my stomach like a twisting knot. I forced a smile, trying to brush it off, to pretend that the sting of rejection was nothing. I greeted relatives politely, making small talk that fell flat, swallowed by the undertone of exclusion. But as the minutes passed, embarrassment shifted into simmering anger. I had endured this subtle marginalization for years, watched my sister bask in attention while my efforts were minimized, and tolerated whispered dismissals that cut deeper than words. And now, the public nature of this slight, deliberate, unmistakable, ignited something inside me. It was in that moment, standing at the edge of the room with no place to sit, that I realized this wasn't just a one-time oversight. This was a pattern, a carefully rehearsed dance that had played out countless times before. The laughter, the jokes, the casual disregard, all signs that my family had perfected the art of making me feel small, of reminding me of my place at the periphery. And yet, beneath the sting, beneath the humiliation, something shifted. I wasn't going to shrink into the background this time. Every whispered comment and sideways glance fed a quiet, intense determination. The same family that had dismissed me, that had subtly undermined my confidence for years, had no idea what was coming next. Their laughter, meant to belittle, had only fueled the fire that was quietly building inside me. I looked around the table, memorizing the smug expressions, noting who would be the easiest to shock, who would crumble first under the weight of truth. In that moment, the seed of revenge took root, germinating in the fertile soil of years of exclusion and resentment. The room that had once symbolized my invisibility now became a stage for something entirely different. What they didn't know, what no one at that table could have predicted, was that I wasn't about to stay invisible anymore. And as I straightened my posture, a sense of purpose replacing humiliation, I realized that this Thanksgiving, everything was about to change. The room was alive with conversation, the hum of laughter and clinking cutlery creating a backdrop that made me feel even smaller. I perched at the edge of the table on a folding chair that had been dragged in hastily, as if to remind me that I didn't belong. My back pressed against the wall, I became acutely aware of every glance, every smirk, every whispered remark that cut through the warmth like a knife. The contrast between the jovial, inclusive atmosphere for everyone else and the cold dismissal I felt was suffocating, almost unbearable. From the start, the favoritism was glaring. My parents barely acknowledged my presence, instead praising my sister's accomplishments as if they were the only ones that mattered. "Did you hear about what she did at work? Incredible, right?" my mother said, eyes shining with pride while I tried to catch her gaze, only to be ignored. My sister laughed, blissfully unaware, or perhaps perfectly aware, basking in their approval, her charm amplified by their relentless encouragement. Every word, every compliment, every bit of attention was a reminder of what I had been denied for years. The subtle humiliation kept piling on. Cousins leaned over to whisper jokes that I was too polite to react to, their laughter carefully timed to make me uncomfortable. My uncle made a comment about how someone should have warned me you might show up, and the room tittered like it was the height of comedy. I forced a tight smile, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. The folding chair felt more like a throne of shame than a place to sit, and I realized with bitter clarity that this dinner had become a performance, one where my role was perpetual embarrassment. Every topic of conversation seemed to highlight my exclusion. My achievements, my recent promotion, the little victories I had quietly built outside the family's notice, were completely ignored. Instead, the table celebrated my sister's minor triumphs as if they were monumental, her life an endless string of successes to be admired, dissected, and praised. My voice, if raised, would have been dismissed. My presence, already minimized, rendered invisible by the unspoken rules of this family hierarchy. Every laugh, every sideways glance, every polite nod at me was calculated, reinforcing the lesson I had been taught over and over. I did not belong. The humiliation was relentless. Even as I tried to focus on the meal, the subtle jabs and passive-aggressive comments penetrated every bite. My cousin whispered, "Wow, didn't think you'd actually make it," and another added under their breath, "Good luck finding a chair." My stomach knotted with anger, a slow-burning heat that replaced the initial sting of embarrassment. I could feel every eye on me for a fleeting second before they returned to the safe warmth of their laughter. It was as if my existence were a minor disturbance in their perfectly orchestrated celebration, an anomaly to be tolerated and laughed at rather than acknowledged. And yet, amid the suffocating sense of invisibility, a shift was quietly taking place inside me. I had spent years playing this role, the polite, compliant sibling who endured, who stayed silent, who internalized the slights. But now, the humiliation sparked something different. A steady, simmering fire that refused to be extinguished by their laughter or their dismissals. I began to observe, calculating and patient, mentally cataloging every slight, every smirk, every moment of favoritism that had cut me down over the years. I realized that this was no longer just about embarrassment. It was about control. This family had controlled the narrative for too long, dictating who was valued and who was invisible. And in that instant, I made a quiet, resolute decision. Enough was enough. I would no longer endure this treatment quietly. The laughter, the whispers, the public slights, none of it would go unanswered. And the tables of my family would soon witness a truth they had never imagined. The tension around me thickened, and the energy of the room, a mix of celebration and judgment, only sharpened my focus. Every forkful, every clink of glass, every conversation about my sister's achievements reminded me of what I had been denied, and yet it also fueled a new clarity. The seed of revenge, planted years ago by repeated exclusion, had grown into a plan taking root. This dinner, once a symbol of my invisibility, was about to become the stage for the reversal I had been waiting for. As I straightened my posture and met my sister's laughing gaze, I felt the first flicker of empowerment. I would not be another shadow in the room. I would no longer allow my voice to be erased, my accomplishments ignored, my presence dismissed. And in that quiet, unspoken vow, I knew the course of the evening was shifting. The rising tension of the family's favoritism and my humiliation had reached its peak, and from here, the only direction was toward confrontation, a reckoning they would never see coming. The final straw came when my uncle, leaning back in his chair with that self-satisfied smirk, made a joke I would never forget. "I guess someone forgot to bring a chair for our little wallflower," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. The room erupted in laughter. My parents joined in, nodding, chuckling as if this was the funniest thing they had heard all day. My stomach dropped, my cheeks burned, and for a moment, the urge to storm out, to yell, to demand acknowledgement, rose like a tidal wave. But instead of giving in, something inside me snapped, and in that silence, a dangerous clarity settled. Years of being dismissed, of watching my sister glide effortlessly into praise and attention while I was reduced to polite smiles and ignored accomplishments, all crystallized in that one moment. Every slight, every whisper, every carefully orchestrated exclusion surged through me at once. The laughter around me, which was meant to belittle, now fueled an entirely different fire, the fire of determination. I realized I had been underestimating my own strength, that my power had been quietly accumulating while they assumed I was powerless. I held my composure, my face neutral, my voice calm when I finally spoke. I didn't apologize, I didn't justify, I didn't cry. I simply sat, letting their amusement wash over me like a river I had no intention of swimming in. That silence, deliberate and controlled, was more dangerous than any outburst I could have made. In that stillness, I began to see the situation clearly. These were not just casual slights. This was a system, a hierarchy maintained by favoritism, laughter, and shared complicity. And for the first time, I understood that I didn't have to participate in their game on their terms. As the conversation continued, each laugh and every glance at my sister reminded me of the imbalance I had endured for so long. I could have snapped, made a scene, begged for acknowledgement, but instead, I let the humiliation settle, letting it seed a meticulous plan in my mind. My parents thought they were in control. They thought their jokes and dismissals were harmless. They had no idea that this very environment, which had tried to keep me small, had sharpened my observation, honed my patience, and steeled my resolve. In that moment, the shift from victim to strategist began. I started to catalog every person, every weakness, every subtle blind spot in the family's behavior. Who laughed too easily? Who sought approval the most? Who depended on appearances to maintain control? I mentally mapped the room, noting alliances and vulnerabilities, all while maintaining a calm exterior. The irony was delicious. The very family that had mocked me for years was unknowingly giving me the tools I would need to turn the tide. By the time the laughter died down, I had made a decision. This would no longer be a night of silent suffering. This would be a turning point. I would not confront them with anger or tears. I would confront them with results, with undeniable proof of my value, with a reversal they could not ignore. The humiliation I had endured was not a weakness. It was a weapon, a catalyst, a reminder that I had been underestimated for far too long. As I looked around the table at their smug faces, I felt an unexpected calm. Every whisper, every joke, every dismissal was now fuel, not wound. I knew that what was about to unfold would not only expose the favoritism and arrogance that had overshadowed me for years, but also reclaim the dignity they had denied me. The fire inside me was no longer reactive. It was deliberate, precise, and unyielding. If they thought I was powerless, they were about to learn how wrong they were. What they didn't know, what no one at that table suspected, was that the quiet, overlooked sibling they had dismissed for years had been quietly building a life far beyond their narrow view. While they celebrated small achievements, basked in their own sense of superiority, and dismissed me as inconsequential, I had been laying the groundwork for a moment like this. My invisibility had been an advantage, a shield that allowed me to move unnoticed, gather influence, and build connections that would soon shift the entire family dynamic. Over the past year, I had achieved what they never thought I could. A promotion that positioned me independently, financially secure, and strategically connected. Partnerships and alliances that had placed me in positions of authority and respect far beyond the confines of their kitchen and dining room table. The years of being underestimated, ignored, and dismissed had given me the clarity and patience to cultivate power quietly. The kind of power they could not mock, laugh at, or diminish. Even more critical, I wasn't alone. One of my closest allies had just arrived at the dinner with me, a respected family friend, someone whose opinion carried weight in ways my parents had long ignored. Their presence was subtle, unassuming, but it added a layer of credibility to the revelation I was about to make. No one noticed the glance we exchanged across the room, but it was enough to signal that the balance of power had quietly shifted. As the dinner carried on, my sister's laughter and the casual indulgence of my parents' favoritism continued, blissfully unaware that the narrative was about to flip. I looked at each smug face, cataloging their reactions, appreciating the irony that the very table that had spent decades teaching me humility would soon witness a lesson in shock and reversal. The anticipation was electric, a tension that built quietly in my chest while the room remained oblivious. I had been careful not to flaunt my achievements outside moments like this. The family thought I was still the quiet, compliant sibling, the one who could be brushed aside without consequence. They had underestimated my patience, my intelligence, and my ability to turn exclusion into preparation. All those years of standing on the edges, of smiling while feeling invisible, had sharpened me. I had learned the art of observation, the subtle psychology of influence, and the timing required to reveal power when it would be most devastating. Now, as I surveyed the room, I realized that the moment had arrived. The table that had mocked me, the relatives who had whispered and smirked, and the parents who had laughed at my humiliation were about to experience the unexpected. The secret I had held close was no longer a private advantage. It was a weapon. My silence over the years had not been weakness. It had been strategy. And the strategy was about to unfold with precision. The emotional weight of the anticipation was almost tangible. My pulse quickened not from fear, but from the thrill of impending revelation. Every laugh that had once stung now fueled my confidence. Every dismissive glance and every whispered insult had prepared me for this. I had turned the tables on the very system that sought to minimize me. And now I was ready to show them that the invisible sibling was, in fact, the most formidable presence in the room. As the main course was served, I positioned myself subtly, making sure my ally was acknowledged in casual conversation without revealing our connection prematurely. The stage was set. All that remained was the moment to drop the bomb, the revelation that would turn the night upside down. that would expose the fragile illusion of superiority my family had long maintained. I could almost see the shock on their faces before it happened, and the anticipation coursed through me like electricity. No one suspected, no one prepared, and no one imagined that the very person they had tried to erase from the evening would be the one holding the power to redefine it. The contrast between the laughter-filled ignorance of the room and the impending upheaval was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control, fully seen, not as the ignored sibling, but as the orchestrator of the evening's most dramatic revelation. And as I took a deep breath, poised to reveal what they could never have anticipated, I knew that everything was about to change. The table that had dismissed me would soon recognize the truth. I was no longer the overlooked one. I held the unseen power, and the shock that followed would be nothing short of spectacular. The moment had arrived. The laughter, the casual chatter, the smug satisfaction on their faces. It was all about to shatter. I cleared my throat softly, letting the room's energy settle around me. Everyone paused, half out of curiosity, half out of the natural instinct to notice the quiet sibling finally speaking. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand attention. I simply began, letting the calm precision of my words carry the weight they had never expected. "I see everyone is enjoying the evening," I said, voice measured, eyes sweeping across the table. "It's been interesting to watch how much care goes into certain seats and certain conversations. But what I think most people don't realize is how much this dinner, this tradition, relied on support that many assume comes from nowhere." I let the pause linger, long enough for them to sense that something was coming, something they couldn't anticipate. My mother's eyes flickered, a subtle tightening of her lips. My father shifted uncomfortably, caught mid-laugh, realizing that I was holding the attention of the room in a way I never had before. My sister's grin faltered, that golden glow of effortless charm beginning to dim. The contrast was intoxicating. The same family that had belittled and ignored me now sat on edge, uncertain, forced to reckon with my presence in a completely new light. "I've spent a lot of time this past year quietly building things," I continued, letting each word land carefully. "Financial independence, professional partnerships, and yes, even helping organize this very dinner." The words hung in the air, a bombshell delivered with surgical precision. Gasps rippled around the room. My parents' eyes widened in disbelief. The golden sibling's mouth opened to speak, but no words came. For once, she had no applause to soak up, no shield of parental indulgence to hide behind. I allowed a brief smile, not cruel, but confident, the kind that only comes from finally being seen for exactly who you are. Some of you may not have realized it, but the preparations you praised, the seamless execution you took for granted, I was behind a lot of it. And the decisions about where everyone would sit, about who would have what attention, were things I could have ignored or let slip. Except I chose to observe instead, to learn, to understand how this family operates. The room was silent now, tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Every face was frozen in a mixture of shock and disbelief. My parents' laughter, which had once dismissed me, was gone. My sister, the golden child, who had thrived on attention and admiration, sat speechless, exposed in a way she had never experienced. The roles that had defined us for years, her dominance, my invisibility, had flipped in an instant. My calmness, my precision, my patience over the years had all culminated in this revelation. The humiliation they had inflicted upon me now returned to the table in full, undeniable force. But it was no longer mine. It was theirs. I let the silence stretch, savoring the shift. Then, with a measured nod toward the ally I had brought, I added, "And some of you may already know my associate here. Their support and collaboration has been invaluable, proving that respect and recognition can't be bought with favoritism or overlooked traditions. It's earned, quietly, thoughtfully, strategically." The subtle acknowledgement drove the point home. The overlooked sibling, the one who had been minimized and mocked, now commanded authority that no one at this table could dismiss. My sister's attempts at words failed, her usual confidence unraveling. My parents opened their mouths, unsure whether to scold, apologize, or defend themselves. But no response could undo the revelation. The entire room had shifted on its axis, a subtle earthquake of power dynamics, carefully measured, unstoppable. The golden glow of privilege and entitlement had been exposed as brittle, dependent on the very invisibility of others to maintain. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of empowerment, the satisfaction of silence turned into authority, the thrill of control over a narrative I had never been allowed to shape. Every whispered insult, every casual dismissal, every laugh at my expense had led to this crescendo. And now finally, the table had to reckon with it. The family that had held the power over me for so long could only sit and witness. Their own assumptions dismantled, their pride fractured. I ended with a soft, deliberate statement, letting the finality settle. So while some seats may have seemed unimportant, some voices ignored and some achievements overlooked, the reality is that respect, recognition, and influence cannot be dictated by familiarity or favoritism. They are earned, sometimes quietly, sometimes unnoticed, until the moment they must be acknowledged. The words were not an accusation. They were a declaration. And as the room absorbed the truth, I knew this was the climax of years of exclusion, the moment of undeniable reversal. For the first time, the laughter, the dismissals, the whispers, all the tools of humiliation my family had wielded against me, belonged to someone else. And the table that had ignored me for years would never forget it. The shift was immediate and undeniable. The laughter that once dismissed me, the whispers that once undermined me, the casual favoritism that had kept me invisible, it all reversed, leaving the family stunned and quiet. I no longer needed their approval, their praise, or their acknowledgement to validate my presence. The room that had been my stage of humiliation had become the stage of my authority, and every eye at that table recognized it, whether they admitted it or not. The golden sibling, so accustomed to being the center of attention, sat silent, her confidence fractured. For once, her triumphs could not overshadow mine, nor could the family's favoritism shield her from the reality of my presence and authority. The dynamic that had defined our interactions for years was fractured, leaving a new, unspoken respect in its place. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The power of the revelation was enough. Every smile, every glance, every pause in the conversation now carried weight. The air itself seemed to shift, dense with acknowledgement and the unspoken understanding that things had changed forever. Humiliation had turned to vindication, exclusion into influence, and the quiet patience I had maintained for years now radiated as authority. In that moment, dignity was restored. I was no longer the shadow in the room, the sibling whose accomplishments were ignored and whose presence was minimized. I had reclaimed my space, silently but decisively, proving that respect cannot be forced, only earned, and sometimes quietly commanded. The family dynamic would never be the same, and I knew it. The scales of favoritism had been corrected, the hierarchy disrupted, and I finally felt a steady, unshakable sense of justice. The Thanksgiving table, once a symbol of my invisibility, had become a testament to the strength, patience, and quiet power I had cultivated, and no one would ever underestimate me again. The aftermath was subtle but telling. Some relatives approached quietly, offering small smiles, tentative words of support that acknowledged the shift without needing to state it outright. Others avoided eye contact entirely, the discomfort of witnessing the reversal of roles written clearly on their faces. My parents, predictably, remained defensive, their expressions a mix of disbelief, frustration, and stubborn pride. Yet none of it mattered. I no longer needed their approval, their praise, or their acknowledgement. I had claimed my own identity, my own power, and my own voice, and that was enough. Walking out of the dining room, head held high, I felt an unexpected clarity. Years of exclusion, whispers, and dismissals had shaped me. Yes, but they had also sharpened me, honed my patience, and fueled a determination that no favor or criticism could shake. I understood now that being overlooked was not a weakness. It was a gift, a chance to grow quietly, observe carefully, and strike when the moment was right. As I stepped away from the table, leaving the tension and unspoken truths behind, a sense of bittersweet empowerment washed over me. And that's when I realized maybe not having a seat at their table was the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes, the people who dismiss you, the ones who make you feel small or invisible, aren't the end of your story. They're the beginning. Being left out, ignored, or underestimated can feel like a wound, but it can also become the fire that shapes you, the quiet push that builds strength you never knew you had. I learned that exclusion doesn't have to define you. It can redefine you. And as I stand taller today, stronger and more certain than ever, I wonder, have you ever been left out, only to come back stronger than anyone expected? What would you do if this happened to you? Comment below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more. See you in the next video.